Hello, I'm Penelope Mavor, and welcome to Earth Converse podcast, where we explore our relationship and conversations with the earth, all in the hope of inspiring a deeper connection with ourselves, each other, and the earth that is our home. Here's my teacher, but also co-learner. I think we're lifelong learners. Christiane Frischmuth, calling in from Washington, D.C., but German by birth. And we met like 2 years ago at Denver train station. And we were on our way. Yeah. I think I double parked the car, and this delightful woman who has been such an inspiration because we did a mirroring course. So she was a guide and helping us mirror, to reflect back people's stories. And to be mirrored by Christiane is just such a lesson, and to be really listened to and felt loved, because she just is with you in such a deep way and has this beautiful worldliness that, and sort of so many offerings and parts to her, that then she will put your story in a beautiful song or theatre, or just, it's really, really quite something. So Christiane is an international consultant. She's got her own global business, and she's won an award for a winner of a 2018 CEO Today Management Consulting Award. And you've worked in the international development sector, and now in a global consulting, also as a vision guide. And I've got the pleasure of currently helping her to pilot her nature-based coaching program, working online with it. So I was out last night doing a solo as part of that, and now I'm here with you. So thank you so much.
Well, what a lovely introduction. I'm like, all right, okay, I put those hats on gladly.
We'll go linear. Your background and your growing up, you've gone from the farming background to the city, Washington, D.C., and this wonderful solo hike. So I'm going to actually have a little excerpt from your blog in a woman's solo, which I'll put on the credentials of this episode. September the 7th, 2014. All my low and high points, transitions, challenges, reconnecting, letting go, or getting closer, major decisions have taken place in nature, or I have processed them in nature. So that's quite a start. So we're going to hear your background, and then around the hike, your vision guiding, and then go into your offers. And like a good consultant, you'll leave us with some tools and ideas about how we can become more conscious in our relationship and conversations with the earth. How does that sound?
Yeah, that last part sounds like a high bar, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Actually, I love this also in your blog. I hiked in mum's belly. So start there, in your mum's belly.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, Germany, is a country where a lot of people have been living for so many generations. I mean, we've had migrants, but I think a lot of the population really can trace their roots back to before recorded time. And so my mother's family has come from this small farming village in Germany, and goes back and back and back and back. I don't know. I think my uncle traced it to at least recorded records, written records of, I don't know, maybe like the 16th or 15th century. Wow. So very, very deep roots. And I think almost all my family have been farmers or farmers plus. And so my mom, grew up on a farm. My father was a refugee. They lived in Berlin, and when the Russian army came in World War II, Mom packed up the 3 kids in a cart, and his dad, my grandfather, was a soldier, and so they fled from the Russian army until the Red Cross put the family back together. But so my dad's experiences are all in nature, survival through nature, stealing eggs and collecting acorns, and my mom's side is, farming the land. And so I guess when those two came together, nature was always part of our family. They'd come home from work, and the first thing they did is took off his clothes, put on the oldest things they could find, and we'd go barefoot into the forest. And so that's what my mom did. And so in her belly, I hiked with her probably every day, or went in the garden, or in fact, she said the night before I was born and I was 2 weeks overdue, she was with friends in the yard of my grandma's farm, and she danced. She loved dancing. She danced the Charleston, the one where you kick up your legs.
Yeah.
And half an hour later, the water broke. So dancing and barefoot in the yard got me to finally say, I guess I'll come out.
No. Are you a dancer?
I love dancing. I don't do it as much as my heart probably would love. So nature really has been a part. And so I grew up the first 3 years of my life on my grandma's farm in a small village. Everybody was related to me. And I don't believe I ever thought of the separation of nature, outdoors and indoors. The doors were always open. We'd run in and out. The farmers would be in and out. Didn't matter if it rained or not. The concept of shelter was different. It felt like there wasn't that separation.
Sorry, what was your memory, your first memory then?
I don't know first memory, just because I've heard so many stories and seen slides, so I don't know what's mine and what's been given to me. Yeah. But what's certainly absolutely clear is sensory. Barefoot. I mean, barefoot. And every substance or that you could step on, just having that feel still. The grass, the cobblestones, the dirt, the rocks, the roots, the flower bed, the garden bed to pull out the carrots, and probably smells, because I spent almost all my time outside. They couldn't get me indoors. And so the smells, the rain, the soil, there was no sense of outside was dirt. It was something negative. It was the positive. Yeah. You could pull out a carrot and eat it with all the dirt on. But if you were to buy something from the store, you'd wash it.
I have a similar experience.
You do?
Yeah, from my dad and his vegetable garden.
Memories are probably the ones that I feel most in my body. No fear of outdoors and climbing, and that's been verified. I wanted to climb everything without help. My mom said the things that I always would say, no, I'll do it alone. If I was climbing stairs or climbing a tree and they wanted to give me a hand, no.
Actually, I read that in your blog, this word alone. It was early in your vocabulary.
Very early. And then perhaps just the next step I remember is that I also have this sense in my body that when people, relationship, emotions, or the indoors became too close, too stuck, too overwhelming, my way of dealing with it has always been, I've got to get out. And just the fact of going out would always give me a spaciousness and a groundedness and a reconnection that when I came back inside or back to the previous stuck place, I was unstuck. And so I was then able to deal with things in a much, much better way.
So an escape, and an escape and a healing at the same time.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that. I know I've been thinking about that a lot. How much was it an escape? And if I had been able to stay with it, resolving it in a different way. And I feel that it was empowering for me to say too much. I'm going to go, even as a young kid, just disappearing for an hour and a half, getting on my bike or walking. But also I think that intrinsic knowledge that right now, the place I'm in, I just cannot take any more. I'm not in a place where I can deal with this being true to myself. I need to go somewhere where I can get that back, and then come back and be back to my true self. I think that's been in my body, and without thinking, that's always been the case, always.
Yeah, it really is in your bones to go out intuitively seek the outdoors, the nature, to reset.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just this feeling of no fear, just no fear. And I think my parents and all my farming families helped with that. Nobody instilled fear. Nobody said, don't do this, or don't balance here, or don't climb here, or, there wasn't this hovering supervision. My brother and I disappeared for days, we'd come back at night, but we were just gone.
And that's continued, hasn't it? You two,
that's
on
continued.
Your adventures. You don't experience fear.
Interestingly enough, I feel that, one, when I go out now, my main fear is other humans. So when I do my solo hikes, my main fear is, could somebody wish me harm from other humans? And that has led me to, for example, not go into Rock Creek Park, which is a wonderful national park where I live in Washington, after dark, which is really a pity because I just love to sleep there overnight. And even in Wiesbaden, where my parents still live, there's a wonderful, wonderful, huge areas of forest. And I've so often thought of hanging up a hammock, and I just don't feel safe. It's so close to a city. So I feel that probably also as a woman, right in the back of my neck, it's this human predator worry. And just not feeling I have enough skills and potentially even strength to deal with physically with that. And then, as I've become more understanding of what the impact of my getting hurt in an accident would have on my parents and my brother and others, I've become more cautious from that sense of responsibility, So I probably am pausing longer before I climb up or down something than I would have even 5 years ago, And it's not so much the fear of, can I do it, but are you really sure that this is okay, given what the repercussions could be?
Yeah, keep going.
So I never stopped with the nature being such a huge, huge part of my life. Even when we moved to the city, and the same thing, we were a gang of kids. And our parents were like, out you go, put on your rubber boots, your Wellingtons, and don't come back until, dinner time. And we would just be roaming. As I got older and, my social life changed and we moved to another part of the city, feeling really unhappy and sort of trapped because that part of the city wasn't as wild anymore. And we moved to the 4th floor and there were no other kids. And also my social life changed, like I was more a teenager. And so it wasn't so much about, getting rid of manure and having my little baby calf at my aunt's place, but it was more about being on my bike and riding, 25 miles to have endless conversations about that boy with my best friend, So it was a different kind of outdoors, but we definitely spent more time indoors, or on the porch. But that's, I think, a normal life, life transition. When I look back now, I think the concept of life and death felt so different because it wasn't removed. My uncle butchered. I grew up chopping the head of a chicken, which is funny. I'm vegetarian vegan now and have been for a long time, but plucking the chicken, I was involved in every part of the food process. And the village cemetery was part of our daily life. And so for large chunks of the summer when I stayed with my grandma and she got older, I would be in charge of watering the plants on the graves every day. And it was a gathering place. I loved that cemetery. It was, I still, every time I go and visit my grandma's village, the first place I stop is her grave. And, we would talk about them as if they were still alive and they were part of everyday life. And the cemetery was the gathering place. So I feel such a different relationship, to ancestors and to them still being with us and them being in the land and on the land. And also obviously in farming, something dies to provide life to something else. And it was done quite quite respectfully.
How is that sort of integrated, or your approach to life? I'm thinking of the quote, roots and wings. I love that. The best thing parents can give are roots and wings. And it sounds like yours were really from ancestral back, tracing it back down to the sort of the farming, the land roots. And then I know yourself, and in terms of international woman, how have they influenced you?
It's a really great question. I feel my roots are so deep, and sometimes, there are exercises where people imagine who's got your back. And I have a never-ending line of strong, solid tribal members, or clan members or family members that go beyond my birth family, especially very strong women all the way back. I mean, all the way, go. And I feel I really, there's a solidity also to my feet on the ground and this rock solidness. I feel that has also made it harder many times to grow wings, because I'm so anchored. And I feel that during the times where I've needed to grow wings, I had to do it. Often I felt on my own, because my people wanted me to stay.
Yes.
And that it required sometimes what felt like a chopping off. I've got to really pull the roots out to have wings. I've always returned. But looking back, I feel, well, maybe I could have done it not as abruptly, maybe I could have been in a conversation more so people understood more why I needed to leave, or I don't know what my brother was thinking when his sister all of a sudden left and he became the only child. Well, I know it was hard for him, but it felt like I really need to do that for me, and I've just got to go. But
you've obviously been, because you've been in the States for a number of years now.
Yeah, my parents in that sense were great. They encouraged, we traveled, a lot of Europeans spent the summer holidays somewhere else. You cram the family into a small car and then you drive to Italy or to France. And they wanted to support me in learning languages. And so I spent a summer in France and a summer in England with families. And then I just traveled with friends, we backpacked through France, and we, I biked with friends and I camped with friends. And then I went to an international school in Wales, and very nature-based, in a place by the ocean, United World College, it's called. So there are 21 or 22 of those now. And that led me then to the US. And I would say that also expanded my world, because the kind of wilderness that exists in the US, I had not found that type of wilderness, in Europe. And so that was another spreading wings, like that wildness. It's just, And I would say another part is that, like we talked before, in every transition I had, I've gone to nature. So I won't go through everything, but I think what you read from the blog is so true. Because when I look back, finished with that part of my life, the college, first thing I did is I bought a backpack and an interrail ticket, and I, for a few months, I spent in Scandinavia visiting friends, always outdoors. And then when I was done with college here in the States, I came to the States for 4 years to go to get my bachelor and master's degree. So when college was over, I bought this old car and went back and forth, across the country, barefoot.
Wow.
And just sleeping under the stars and, on Big Sur, and just, again, having people help me on the way. And then when I was done with my graduate degree, my then boyfriend and I backpacked for 2 years in Asia and Australia and New Zealand and the islands. Again, all in nature. We hiked. I remember there was one stretch where we were literally walking in New Zealand for 6 weeks. Yeah. So it's always been that part of, I'm in transition. I'm in between places. I have no clue what the next step is. Go out.
And was that Like in terms of, yes, there's some intentionality around that, around the transitions, and there's some, I need to figure out where I'm going, and I'll go out to nature to find it. Was that in your subconscious, or through sort of becoming? When did you become more intentional? Because I think that we go on adventure and exploring. We're tourists, we're hikers. We travel the world if we're lucky. And at what point was it in the intentionality of it?
Perhaps when I did the backpacking trip for 2 years, there was this real sense of life phase that this is a good time to not be structured, to not plan ahead. This is the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think before it was also the right time, but not with that intentionality. Yeah. And I often say, if my grandma got very sick and she then passed away. And so I made it back in time to be with her for the last month and accompany her in her dying. And I think if that hadn't happened, if she had managed to be immortal, I keep thinking I'd still be backpacking in nature, I'd be on national park number 4,890. I'd have moss growing, and my backpack would have gotten lighter. By now I'd be down probably just to, no underwear, no socks.
Well, thank you, Grandma. And but what a beautiful honoring and being able to accompany her at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was important. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that? Or?
I feel that it brought a real realization to me that that death is both a letting go, but also bringing closer. Because right when it happened, some families break apart when they experience, an instrumental, important family member not being there anymore that has been maybe holding things in a certain way. Now, granted, it wasn't my mom or dad at that time, but still, she was so important for my brother and I in that, and my parents too. But our family came together. That tribe came together. My grandma's cousins and who are still alive, and all the people who've been sitting in her lap, and who she cooked for. We all came together, and I felt so held. And so there was such an intimacy and vulnerability and the celebration of her life. To a certain degree, I felt like, I wish that never ends. But it was death that brought us together. And it feels very different when it's a wedding or a baptism than when it's a death. There is sort of that. So I came to appreciate death or even a crisis as, in a way, bringing out often the best in all of us, remembering what's really core. The walls, shields fall away. And so that, I think, was a really important learning for me. And I can't say that for sure, but I found crises don't really scare me. There are other things that scare me, but a crisis like that, I think I have that belief it can bring people together and bring the best of people.
And what does scare you?
Well, I think at a really deep level is one is rejection. In some way feeling that I have to be careful and prevent that, which of course you can't, right? And that's part of taking wing, to have that liberty to just be compassionate, but you just don't know, right? You can't do something for other people. You can just be the most authentic you can. But I would say that's probably a big one. And with my mother's milk, I feel like I have that safety, that financial safety concern, in a way, the post-war experience that my parents and my grandparents have held. I feel in a way I'm still a post-war generation. My brother holds it differently, but I think growing up in the village, so close to the stories of everybody, not having enough food, not having money, not knowing, losing so many, particularly men in the war. I think every time we left my grandma, she would be worried that she'd never see us again. Accidents could happen when we were driving. So this reassurance, I'm going to see you again, and the worry that not. And financial security and enough food and shelter. That's big. Incidentally, I don't care much about food. I like it, but I can go for days without it, and I'd rather hike than worry about stopping for food. But finances and money and what it represents, that's a big one. Like I'm like my mom. It's like with this COVID now, I lost a lot of income, and within a day I saw myself, dying under a bridge. It's not realistic, but it's so embedded in me. Boom, that image comes out. So I would say those two probably will continue to accompany me my whole life.
Taking those questions out to the land.
I have. And again, nature is my guide, because so jumping ahead, I did my first vision fast in 2008 or 2009. And two themes that came up for me was that in order to grow wings, I needed to really deeply work on that. What is my war and what's not my war?
Yeah.
And I realized how much of what I've lived has been not my war. It has been my parents' war. It's been the ancestral war. It has been other people's war. And that was really hard. I remember crawling. I was in a Red Rock Canyon, and I remember doing, Death Lodge and a lot of ceremonies. But I remember for many, many parts of the days crawling into this, there was this little crack in one of the cliffs, crawling, squeezing myself in as tight as I could, like in a tomb, and just having whatever come, and really this liberation sense of shouting out, this is not my war, and then I wrote a lot of poetry about that. It just poured out of me. I think I wrote something like 30 poems during my first vision fast.
Is one stirring in you?
I'd have to look it up. It's on I have another blog. It's on my website, which is called Singing Bowl.
Oh, great. I'll put that in the link as well. Oh, super. I didn't know that. That's such a big thing. What's mine? What's the individual versus the collective story? Or what am I shedding? What am I carrying along for the ancestors? And wow.
And the other part I remember connected with that when I said rejection or the security is that, for those who don't know vision fast, who are listening, at one point you decide where the spot will be where you're going to spend a significant amount of alone time. And there was a process where they had us all be in a circle and then close our eyes and turn around and just point in the direction that felt it was really drawing us. I mean, you could leave your eyes open or closed. And I clearly knew, like my arm flew out and I turned and that was it. And at that moment where I made the clear, full body decision where to go, I turned in the other direction and I burst out in tears. There was this incredible grieving and heart-wrenching, like I felt I was dying because I had said no to the other direction. So what was in there was a door closing. I rejected something. I will never know what it would have felt like to be there. I can't have all of the different aspects. So that was another, it was another understanding of everything that's tied up in saying no, or, having said yes and no to me, because clearly the nature also told me, you're not going there, you're going there.
And what came out of the journey in that?
I don't know, maybe because it's not complete, it's an ongoing journey. Like I said, it's a core, that and safety. I think these are sometimes people talk about core wounds. Clearly, there was something that was triggered in me that embedded it so deeply that, I will always revisit. I'll always cycle and I'm like, oh, I can deal with this better now. Look at that. I'm not the same I was before. I can deal with this better. Wham. Another iteration. I guess there's more to learn. I feel that those are, so to speak, my core wounds, and I think that they're general themes, am I enough? Am I loved? Am I, so the act of being in the face of all of that will continue to be part of it. for me. I just have never felt that nature rejects. Nature just is, and you're being with it. So I truly cannot think of any experience where I would have put the metaphor on nature that nature rejects me. That's just not in its nature, because I'm part of it. I think that was the other aspect that I really, really came to feel and understand during that first vision fast, that on my first night in my solo spot, I still remember it. I chose, just one backtracking is that in preparation for the solo time, there are often solo day walks involved. And on a lot of my solo day walks, I had some names come to me that clearly were part of my identity that I didn't know. So one name that came to me was Singing Bowl. And all my life, I have gathered people and held the container. And it's part of my profession as a facilitator and trainer and coach. And so I found my solo spot, which was the steep red rock cliff. And on top of it was a sandstone formation that was a perfectly shaped singing bowl.
Ah, beautiful.
And then on the other, and there was a little ledge where I slept. And then on the other side, it went down to this gorgeous creek with aspen trees. And so I had ceremonies in the creek as well as, in the red rocks. Still remember this place. I'll never forget the image. Mm-hmm. But I remember the first night sitting there and the moon came out and I looked around and I literally heard, "Finally, you're here. We've been waiting for you. You are so welcome. Finally, you're here." And it felt like the whole world was saying, not that I hadn't been there before, but it's like, no, finally, that you are welcome, that this is your home, that we've been waiting for you to take up the space. And like every grandfather and grandmother you could think of, they were giving me their lap and saying, "Oh, little one, you're here. We've been waiting." And that's been a recurrent theme in all my fasts, this I'm home. Wow. And so I think in a way that's the other part to security and rejection, isn't it? Because when I feel that way,
isn't it? Yeah, to be like
rejection is not possible.
And do you integrate? Like, is that your happy place? I mean, I would meditate on that. Like that image is constantly with you to remind you if you're feeling less resourceful or you're getting that twinge of, oh, here I go again. I've got the rejection thing happening. That you constantly you return to that image and that felt sense. Yeah.
So I think there's this iteration. The more you know, the more your gut and your heart tells you to follow it. And the more you follow it, the more you know. It's that, reinforcing cycle. And then there's less doubt. There's less doubt. It's just, I know. I just know. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. But also I can sit, with them, like that doubt, sort of that doubt at a sort of ego level, but then, the felt sense of knowing at the same time. I feel like I can hold those two in simultaneously.
Yeah, because I think what I'm really learning over and over again is that, and this goes back again to, the different directions and what nature teaches, that as a responsibility to the community, you want to keep yourself safe. You don't want to have others have to rescue you, or you don't want to be in a place where you're lost to people who will grieve you, And so I feel it's my responsibility to also be skilled. It's my responsibility to be healthy and to keep my muscles in shape. Not just because I can't imagine not being able to hike, but it also feels like it's my responsibility, And so I think that ego structure, that healthy ego, I can feed myself, I know what I need to stay healthy, is a must for everything else.
Absolutely.
It's not egotistical, it's a necessity.
It is it is a service to yourself and the collective, I think. And I think that's the same about consciousness. We have, a moral, ethical, social responsibility to be as conscious as possible.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And this is why I want to do this work. I see that at a collective level. Well, I like to see it, that, everything is every graph you see is exponential, isn't it? And I'm sure consciousness will be too.
And the other thought as you're saying that comes to me is that I hadn't put it in word that way, but I think, when I talk to friends who are child psychologists, they say the way a child can have roots and wings is that there is this solidity of I'm okay, I'm exactly the way I need to be, and I have a safe place to either return to or to push off from, right? If you don't have solid ground, like birds, they need the nest to push off when they first fly, or, every bird pushes off from something. And so I think for me, nature has been that, and the more I have felt at home and welcome and I am a true part of nature, I think the more I have been able to push off and sprout wings, So, for example, after one of the vision fasts, I really determined that bringing nature into my professional practice was going to have to happen. And that triggered fears, right? Because if you say yes to something, you say no to something else, And so what paying work might I give up, and who would come and who would not come, and who can I partner with, and what do I do? But, I've been doing it. And so I think without that building of that solid ground, I would not have been able to take what feels like increasing risks. Mm-hmm. But as they increase, I've been feeling they become less risky. It's like the more you push off and fly, it's like little chicks that hatch. Your wings grow stronger, and then you can soar for longer. So, but I think it's essential to feel that ground.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about your beautiful hike? And I'll put the link on. So, a woman's soul, self-discovery milestone in your life.
I get teary-eyed when I think about it.
Oh, tell us.
I feel like I started getting very confident in if I really feel I need to do something, the universe will align. And if nobody else is doing it with me, I'll do it alone.
Great.
Which then went to the place of, and so I'd always done that, but it was getting more a solid knowing. And so, I've hiked, like I said, for many, many, many long weeks and months. So that part didn't feel complicated or unknown. And I had heard of the John Muir wilderness ever since I first came to the US, but I didn't know much about it. People were just talking. It was like a mythical, like an epic. And what actually triggered it, that I became familiar with the Pacific Crest Trail. And that then pointed me in the direction to find out what actually is behind this epic I've had in my mind for so many years. Is it doable? What does it mean? And so when I became a bit more familiar with that, I was like, that's it. Now is the time to do it, because it became concrete. It stopped being a mythical legend to something concrete. And it wasn't so much, I think, that I turned 50 that year, but I was going through a major shift in my life. And that was the time. It was right. There was nothing else. That's what it was going to be. My parents, my mom, and all my small village relatives tried to talk me out of it. They kept saying, "How can you do this to us? Going into such a danger.
Don't they know you already?
Don't do this to us. We're going to be worried. We're not going to be able to sleep," because I was going to be out of communication, for all that time. But no, it had to happen. And then it took forever just to get the permit. It was like a vision fast process just to get the permit. It took forever, and I thought I might not get it. So I finally got it. And then there was all the planning, because you have to ship your food somewhere in advance and then hike out to pick up the food and come back, and then or organize for somebody to carry it in with you. So I think it took me a good probably 4 or 5 months just to plan everything. And then I bought new equipment and tested my equipment. And the one concession I made was I bought, it's called a spot device, where you can send a signal, pre-written signal to your loved ones that says, "I've arrived at these coordinates and at these," and there's a panic, like a SOS button.
Okay.
And so I did bring that. That was, a concession to my parents resting easy, except if I not had a signal because of cloud cover and hadn't pressed it, my parents would have probably been more worried than not hearing at all.
Yeah.
But it worked, and I took it. And so I remember as I was preparing for it, there was a dear friend who had never really been backpacking and hiking. And I said, well, do you want to come with me over the weekend to Shenandoah? Because I want to test my new tent and check out other things. And so she came with me. And actually, that was the start for her of a lifelong love now of hiking and camping.
Oh, that contagious enthusiasm.
Contagious. But I remember she said, you know what? If I can swing it, I'd love to come with you. And I was clear, no. It was so clear, no. It's just, this was mine. Not as a, I don't love you, but that was my experience, my pace, my process.
Yes, and you weren't rejecting anybody. Yeah. You were just stepping out in your own power and desire for that.
Yeah. And so I would call it was a sort of a vision fast, right? During a major transition. And I decided, with a lot of wonderful support from a woman who lived nearby in Independence. She gave me a lot of tips in terms of the mileage and where to camp. And I decided to take some rest days. So I hiked for, I think it was 29 days. Two things that just stand out for me. Number one was talking about a start. I did everything with public transport because, I don't live on the West Coast. And so I had taken the bus to Yosemite Park, and I was sleeping on the valley floor, and the next day was going to take the shuttle to the high alpine plateau, which is called Tuolumne Meadow. And I had a bear canister shipped to me because you have to put your food in a bear canister to that post office. And then I was going to start from there. My permit started there. And there was wildfire, and the wildfire was encroaching. And so they didn't even know if they would allow people into the park. Yeah. And so the night I arrived, they closed the road that was going to Tuolumne Meadow. And so the next day, here I was. My pack was way too full. I had to then hike, I don't know how many miles, up a very, very steep cliff to the place where I was going to start. And so I was thrown with smoke billowing over and ash falling on me as I was hiking. My start was completely different. And,
Sorry to laugh, but sort of like the opening, when you open a Vision Quest ceremony and you've got the smoke, the sage, sort of you were truly
I'd never thought about it that way. Yeah, and helicopters coming with huge tarps full of water that they were dumping.
Oh goodness, what a blazing start!
Yeah, and I had planned on shipping some things, and so by that time I hadn't quite the idea of how dry it was there. So I didn't have enough water, and I remember reaching the plateau finally, and I was, I think, probably almost dehydrated. And then I saw a bear, and then halfway
without
up
your canister.
Yeah, without my canister, and then halfway up the cliff, it was this really narrow path, cliff up, cliff down, with a little bit of brush. This huge ass rattlesnake is crossing in front of me, and it disappears, but I can still see it on the side. And so here I am, and I'm like, what the heck do I do now? And my pack was so freaking heavy that, I thought I could carry it in my hand and maybe throw it on the snake or shield myself in case, it would attack. I couldn't carry it in any other way than on my back. And so I was like, frickin' A, my hike ends right here.
Yeah, this is not such a good idea. I don't know about this.
Well, because I had to be up because my permit was starting. And if you don't start the day of your permit, you lose your permit.
Wow.
And so finally, some people came the other way, and there was this big, strong guy, and he took a rock and threw it on the trail, and the vibration caused the snake then to leave. I couldn't have lifted it. And so I kept kept going. So I experienced everything I could the first day.
Wow. It was all easy strides from then on in.
All easy strides from there. And the last thing I'll say is when I finally got to the top of Mount Whitney, there's a mountain hut where you can take shelter. And, you start really early because it's a very long day up and an even longer time down. I think it's something like I don't remember, 12, 14, 16-hour day. And I just cried. Like I stopped, just shy of the summit, and I was sitting there and I was crying for the longest time. Just that overwhelm of I'm here. It wasn't even I made it. It was just I'm here. And what I loved about it also, there were a number of other hikers passing me, and they all looked at me and they all gave me this, I get it. I'm with you.
I love that, but you're here, like it's sort of like back in your vision quest, where the ancestors go, finally you're here.
I'm here. And I've done solo hikes since then, and they really sustain me, and they push my edge, for sure, but I wouldn't give it up.
Did you return a different person? I suppose it would be hard not to, like different. I mean,
I did in like all the way to my DNA. It's definitely a rite of passage in that sense. I feel I was more integrated, bolder. And I shifted, I think there was, in a way, I took on more identities and maybe dropped some identities. I remember afterwards really stepping into, I'm a businesswoman. I own my business. I never thought of that before. And it changes you, when you are fully... Claim. Thank you. That's the word. I felt like I claimed a lot of aspects of myself that I hadn't claimed fully or in that way before. And it changes things.
As businesswoman, what in terms of your offerings, and what are you giving to the world for, particularly around the nature-based work that you want to tell us about?
So I think on one hand, which is what everybody feels, it feels like everybody's on that path these days to just offer people more invitations to also be in nature, like the leadership programs that I run, adding more pauses or asking people to walk in nature with a partner rather than sit in a room. So any moment I can to add a nature experience, as well as use nature as a metaphor. People really, that's the metaphors people immediately get. And then continue to guide, always co-guide vision fasts. And so you spoke of the mirror training. So this is an aspect of vision fast, which I think is an important process. I teach the 4 shields. I actually use that in my coaching. I always have it in the back of my mind. It's not just where the person who is coming to me is at that moment, but I put them into the context of their journey of their life. And that just gives such a different perspective, and people love that when I mirror that back, I don't just see a person who came to me and said, how can I manage up? But I also see a person who is in their mid, let's say 40s, who is now in this place of claiming full adulthood. I want a seat at the table. And I can. And that shifts the relationship to how I think about managing up or, managing across. And just that, I think, changes things. And I am, I'm also, for the second year, we hope it fills up with COVID-19, but with 2 friends, there's a river trip on the Green River in Utah where this is for women. Where we take women out in canoes, and they have a solo, and it's this red rock, labyrinth canyon. And, when you hike up, you see this plateau, which looks like Monument Valley. And I find every landscape brings something else different out in me. And not having grown up there, I find the first time I was introduced to this red rock country, Arches or Capitol Reef or Zion or Bryce, it brings out feline energy in me. I've always loved climbing, but I feel I become, a mountain lion. Girl. Like I just run up cliffs and I jump and I go down and I go through water, and it's almost like I wake up afterwards and I'm like, how did I get here? My limbs are different. I have dreams of cats. So I think, in that way, being in that labyrinth canyon for women is an incredible experience. And the shapes of the rocks are metaphorical. You see a council of elders or a womb or whatever it is. And then the other thing I'm doing, which you are a part of, bringing together different strands of my life and weaving them into a program, which I call your True Nature program. And it's that your true nature very often can be found in nature. And this whole idea of nature being a partner with us, and we're being a partner with nature. So it's the respect, the sacredness of being in nature, but also fully trusting that nature will give us and bring to us what it is we need. So it's both of those trusts, so to speak. And so I've been shaping a program that brings together all the rite of passage, vision fast, sacred ceremonies, process, and also translating it to the more linear, rational coaching competencies and tools, and just the words. We talked about that yesterday. Ceremony can also be a practice or a tool or a process. And you can speak it differently, but you can hold it the same. And so that nature program, we've offered in person, and now we've shifted it to also virtual. And it's accredited, so people can get a continuing education credits, which people usually need to continue to be part of their, of the coaching associations that they might be part of. So it's a wonderful weaving and bridge building. We're bringing in the poetry and the songs and the mirroring, but then there's also the very concrete aspect of, where's your coachee at? And what do you offer for that? And when do you ask a question, and when do you mirror, right? And how do you shape how much nature they can take?
Just to reflect back, I love how you integrate, and it's both your personality and my experience of you, the adult here, the north structured self, and then this very, very sensual in her body, soulful person that just weaves all these different components. And I think it's very accessible for a wider audience. What response or buy-in or engagement have you had from people with nature work?
Coaches generally love it, and I think still are very much like me, exploring how can you bring this into our primarily, I would say, corporate leadership, executive world. I think when you're a life coach, primarily, the opportunities might be different. And so I think coaches love it, but which parts? Do I use metaphors? Do I give more homework, so to speak, in that way? But coaches, I find, are very, very much resonating with it. It becomes sort of, how can I build my business on it? Or, who will go along with it to what degree? Who is a paying client? My friends have all loved it. I've offered a lot of programs in DC, weekend programs or like a day-long programs, but one each season. And I've now done this 3 or 4 times. And I would say a lot of my close friends have done it and brought their friends, and it's been transformative for them, just like it has been for us when we do Vision Fast, So again, people who trust me, who know of me, they're like, okay, I'll do it. Workshop participants, especially leadership training, they appreciate so much having more space and time doing work in nature. By day 2, they're like, can we go out? And then absolutely forget the PowerPoint, not important. I have not found that. So the innate, the longing, the wanting response is always, no matter who it is, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I love that. Oh, I want that. The actual making it happen feels still more difficult. That next step, like I can see potential. I remember talking once to a person who works for Google, and they said, oh my God, we must do a team quest. And I said, can do it tomorrow. But the convincing to try it just hasn't happened. The board of the ICF local DC chapter wanted to do it as a team, and then it got postponed because of COVID. But that would be, when it happens, that'll be my first team experience. So again, soul, heart, body, mind, yes. But the step of let's then do it, that's has been more difficult. Yeah. And then getting it as paid work. Yeah.
It's a bit cheesy, but there are, in terms of tips, to increase your connection, with your own true nature or wider nature.
What comes to me right away is that the easiest entry is through the self, through the body, through the senses. Yes, you probably have gone through that, some soul searching, or you've gone full cycle, you think about, how do I keep myself safe when I go out? And you might feel this spiritual aspect of, I want to broaden, or I want to deepen, or I want to meditate and rest. But I think the entrance for me is that child that is living with abandon.
Yeah.
The child that is allowing itself to take it out, and take off and take apart and be curious and sensual and in it and investigate and be open to whatever it is, and not see risk, but see the growing ability to do something. If I can't cross this fallen log standing up, kids will go on all fours, or they'll go on their belly, right? And that's what I do, because you just keep safe. If I feel overwhelmed and I want to cry, I sit down and I cry. So I feel the tip for me would be, take your child by the hand and let it guide you. And so the moment you step out with that intention of just fully being in nature and see what partner it is and what gifts it's bringing, let your child guide you.
That sounds super fun and super you.
Yeah,
lovely.
Yeah, and dance and sing and do whatever, safely, and
go bare feet and get
take your shoes off, Yeah. And strangely enough, I have, how as adults we're so worried about what do other people think, and that kind of curtails, makes us smaller. It's like always this vigilance. I have not had one person come back from a solo experience who said either they noticed others or they cared about it.
To sort of complete it, I know you love your poems. You're always so generous in feeding back your poem. Two there that you would like to share?
I do.
Thank you.
And so the first one is really very much in line with what I said earlier, letting your child guide you. And I think it's the right one for this time that we're in. And also, really, really paying attention to what does your whole body, soul, heart, spirit say, where you need to go, right? What you are attracted to, what you're attuning to, and just going with that. And so this poem is called The Clearing. And the poet is Martha Postlethwaite. And I'm pretty sure I heard it the first time on my first Vision Fast, which is when poetry just became that ancient language that I didn't know, right? That just comes back out of the DNA. So that's what nature does. You remember your ancestral DNA. So The Clearing. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it.
Wow.
I feel it right all the way up from my belly. Where do you feel it?
Oh, it is. It's a shiver. It's down to my feet. It's on my feet and up here. Just right up.
Yeah. So, one solo time walk could be to just be the poem, just go up and sit there and just see what falls into your hand. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. So the second one.
Thank you. Ooh, you ready? All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Or do you need? Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah,
so the second one is called. It's by Rilke, and it's called "The Man Watching."
That's
it's
that you're doing really.
Yeah. Right for this time, and I must admit, I feel the urge to read it every time I take people into nature. There's a sacredness to it.
Do you read it in German? Obviously not to this audience, but do you read his work in German?
Interesting. I have read this poem in German a few times, and it has helped me to understand a little bit more what's behind it. But I rarely do, because my audience is always English speaking, really. And I didn't grow up with poetry. So my access to Rilke has been American friends who've said, "This is amazing guy, Rilke." And I said, "Rilke who?"
Great.
So yeah, the man watching.
The man watching.
I can tell by the way the trees beat after so many dull days on my worried window panes that a storm is coming. And I hear the far off fields say things. I can't bear without a friend. I can't love without a sister. The storm, the shifter of shapes, drives on across the woods and across time. And the world looks as if it had no age. The landscape, like a line in a psalm book, is seriousness and weight and eternity. What we choose to fight is so tiny. What fights with us is so great. If only we could let ourselves be dominated, as things do, by some immense storm, we would become strong too and not need names. When we win, it's with small things, and the triumph makes us small. What is extraordinary and eternal does not want to be bent by us. I mean the angel who appeared to the wrestlers of the Old Testament when the wrestlers' sinews grew long like metal strings. He felt them under his fingers like chords of deep music. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings.
Oh, that's immense. I need to go and lie down.
I know. It's like, what a way. I think we have to do something bubbly right now. It's like,
oh, wow. Okay, on that big note, beautiful you. Thank you.
Surrender
so
to the
much.
storm, right?
Woo.
Surrender to the storm. Fly. Yeah.
Oh,
it's been so nice to have this conversation with you. I feel like it's another version of my story that has been, spiraling, coming into my DNA, right? Because every time we tell our story, it sort of manifests itself differently. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for sharing, bringing your full self, and lovely. So we'll pause here and see you back for the next Earth Converse podcast. And tell us what you think, and comment, subscribe, share, follow, tell it to the wind, and enjoy Earth. one conversation at a time.